Hello, this week we're going to be talking about Homo erectus. Homo erectus was a species that existed between 1.8 and zero point 0.3 million years ago. This is an extremely successful species. That's 1.5 million years the species was around and lived well throughout the old world. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, us, Homo sapiens, we've only been around 200,000 years. So Homo erectus did really well. Now, as usual, I'm going to complement some of your reading, maybe go over a little bit of it, as well as provide some additional material. So before we move on, let's talk about Homo erectus and Homo ergaster. I believe your book does not mention this distinction. This is a distinction that is argued amongst several researchers. So there are researchers that believe Homo erectus found in Africa should be referred to as Homo ergaster because of slight anatomical differences. Where these researchers say Homo ergaster found outside of Africa in the Old World should be called Homo erectus. Now, the other side says that they're all Homo erectus. You shouldn't call it Homo ergaster. Homo ergaster is Homo erectus. Homo erectus is Homo erectus. This should just all be the same. So once again, some believe that Homo erectus found in Africa is called Homo ergaster. Now, your book talks about Homo erectus all the way through, does not make this distinction. The main character that it talks about as far as Homo ergaster / Homo erectus is going to be Turkana boy. Turkana boy was, or Narikatome boy, found near Narikatome Lake, is a really interesting find for several reasons. One, it's quite a complete skeleton. It's 80% of a skeleton, which is a lot. This also allows us to learn a lot. For instance, we know because of the ratio of arms and legs and the anatomy that's presented because of these skeletal remains that Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, is now fully committed to bipedality. There's no more life in trees. There's no more this back and forth, this mosaic. Maybe it spent some time in trees. Maybe it spent some time in ground. No, Homo erectus was always on the ground and was really, really good at walking, as good as we are. So the other important lesson from Turkana boy, and this is part of your reading as well, is the evolution of the growth spurt. This is a really interesting topic, especially when you try to consider why we have a growth spurt. Why does it happen at the ages it does? How does it happen? And what are the evolutionary reasons behind this? All right, let's move on to the footsteps of Illiret. Your book mentions this briefly. I want to talk about for a little bit more. Like the footprints of Laetoli for Afarensis, footprints of Illiret are the footprints of Homo erectus. And now we can see by the footprints that there is fully modern walking. Homo erectus can walk really, really, really well. Now, although your book goes over erectus anatomy, I want to talk about a few key features. Let's first talk about the skull. It averages between 900 and 1100 cc's, so cranial capacity has increased quite a bit. Now, other things I want you to note about the Homo erectus skull is that it is longer than it is wide, and this is going to be important when we start looking at our anatomy, where we do see a wider skull. We also see that it's very angular. Now, this isn't a great sketch of it, but Homo erectus, as well as being longer than it's wide, has this angular feature to it. Further, one of the distinguishing features of Homo erectus is a sagittal keel, where basically the top of the skull comes to a point, a rounded point, a keel. So this is different than a sagittal crest. It's not muscle attachments, but it is a sagittal keel. Also, we see a bar-like supraorbital torus. So this basically bar-like unibrow bony ridge. Supraorbital, supra meaning above, orbital to eye orbits, and torus is a bony protrusion. Now, also, Homo erectus has an occipital torus, which is a protrusion in the back of the skull, an occipital region. Now, you have an occipital torus as well. If you feel the back of your skull, you'll feel a little bump, but we're going to get back to that. Homo erectus is a very pronounced occipital torus. And the last thing I want you to know is that the greatest breadth on Homo erectus skull is very low, meaning the widest part of the skull is at the very, very bottom. And again, this is going to come in play when we look at our anatomy, where the widest part of our skull is actually not all the way down here, but more towards the top. Teeth. Let's look at Erectus teeth real quick. Interestingly, we see incisors. Now, as the face shrinks, as the teeth have shrunk, the enamel has grown in thickness, and the incisors have become shovel-shaped, and this helps with wear. Also, we see molars are smaller and a general decrease in jaw size. Now here I have no chin. Again, we're going to come back to this because one of the interesting differences between Homo sapiens and all of our other ancestors is that we have a chin and they do not. Alright, so Homo erectus, if we were to look at Homo erectus separate from Homo ergaster, we see that it's very similar to Turconaboy, very similar to Homo ergaster, except they're slightly thicker bones. Now, one of the things I do want you to note about Homo erectus is that not only are they all very similar, but that there are differences. And there are differences based on the region. So depending on where we find Homo erectus in the Old World, there are slight anatomical differences with each other. So let's, and the last point before I move on. So we find that body proportions of Homo erectus found throughout the Old World is long and linear, more surface area. Remind you of anything? That's right, Alan Bergman rule. Species adapted for tropical warm environments have longer, lankier limbs and more surface area to help with heat dissipation. Now, before we conclude, I want to go over a few main characters of Erectus, a few big hitters, if you will. One is found in the Republic of Georgia, and this is important because this is the oldest remains that we have outside of Africa. And it's not too far away from the oldest remains we have inside of Africa. So if you date the oldest remains inside of Africa around 1.9 to 1.8, it's not too long after Erectus evolved this ability to be able to walk really well that it used this ability to migrate outside of Africa and exploit new environments. Another one I want to talk about is Peking man. Peking man, again, looking at these regional differences, Homo erectus, but it's slightly thicker, slightly more robust than some other erectus found. And in Peking man, found in China, remains date back between 1 million and 0.8 million years ago. And I want to talk about Java man. Java man is important because it was the first erectus to be discovered. Some researchers have claimed that it might be, there's evidence claiming that it might be the Java man in Java might have the youngest evidence of erectus. Although I said 0.3 million years ago, there's research suggesting that the Java, in island Java, there was erectus around 27,000 years ago, which isn't that long ago. This means that Java man in the island of Java, while the rest of its species had gone extinct, was still alive and flourishing. And the reason we believe this may be is because there was some protection against any extinction forces because of living on an island. So being secluded on an island actually protected this group of Homo erectus from extinction for a longer time. And the last one, Bodo skull. So let's go back to discovery in Africa. Bodo skull is important and interesting, as your book mentions, is that it shows sign of possible ritual mutilation, body manipulation, or cannibalism. So as Tim White was cleaning Bodo skull, right underneath the left eye here, you find some scrape marks that are synonymous with butcher marks. And this is very interesting because it may be the first evidence we have of body manipulation, or if you really want to reach, some people have suggested cannibalism, although there's no other evidence of cannibalism. All right, Homo erectus found in Europe. What I want you to note about Homo erectus found in Europe is that, again, we see these regional differences. So Homo erectus found in Europe is going to be resembling modern humans. How so? Well, Homo erectus found in Europe is going to be more gracile, so the bones are thinner, it's smaller, it has less of a brow ridge, and its body morphology in general resembles more of people. So to conclude, just to show you this picture, about 1.8, 1.9 million years ago, we have Homo erectus evolving in Africa and then slowly migrating out throughout the old world. All right, well, this concludes our talk on Homo erectus. Take care. Bye-bye.